welcome to the St. Joseph Radio Presents live program, broadcasting to you from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. The program that for over 30 years has brought you eloquent speakers from across the globe to help explain, clarify, and evangelize the Catholic faith. Our program covers a variety of topics relating to current issues and occurrences in our daily lives. Now, with the aid of technology, we are able to bring the gospel message to the four corners of the world, where Christ himself did say, "Those who have ears ought to hear." It is our hope at St. Joseph Radio that through these programs we can help evangelize the world and change one soul at a time. Now, here is your host to introduce today's guest and topic.
Well, welcome back, and welcome, actually, because we're just beginning our show today at St. Joseph Radio. Our show is Woman to Woman, and it is a Catholic radio program that is designed to bring you a female perspective of our daily Catholic living in this world today. I am Cory Grizzle, and I'm here with my co-host today, Mary Hayworth, and we are going to be talking about quite not necessarily controversial, but a very serious topic today. But before we get to that, I would like to start with a prayer. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Amen.
So I want to say good morning, but it's not really good morning when we start at noon. But I'm pretty excited about this topic today. We are going to talk about Humanae Vitae, and this is something that is actually very near and dear to my heart. My husband and I have been married for 25 years, and this was a very important topic in our relationship and in our marriage. And we really have taken on a lot of responsibility in earlier in our years in teaching engaged couples about the importance of Humanae Vitae in your marriage, and really educating ourselves and becoming a lot more passionate about this topic. And it all comes down to this topic, or to the document that was Humanae Vitae. And I want to give just a little bit, probably too much, information about the background and the topic the background of this very important document. Humanae Vitae was written, and actually it was written and produced or published on July 25th of 1968. So we're talking 55 years ago. This I'd say very short. It's not very short, but it is short enough to be able to sit down and read through it in one sitting and to be able to pretty much understand everything, because it is talking to the people of the culture of that day. And it's talking to the people of the culture of today as well. So that's why we keep bringing it up. And we, Mary and I both have some pretty great stories about our family and our marriages, and how this particular document and its effects on the church and on the culture and on the people, that how it has affected our lives, and for me, brought me closer to Jesus for sure. So a little bit of background, and let's go back like over 100 years to 1908, where really at that time there was a consensus among all of the religious leaders and among all of the religions that that contraception, in order to not to create life within a marriage, was immoral. There was no question about when you got married, you had a family and everyone supported you, and you worked together as a couple to do this. Now, granted, there's evil in the world, so it wasn't all wine and roses, but that's why we are here today, of course, because we have sin. But what happened was in 1908. There was the start of the Lambeth Conference. They have Lambeth conferences every year, and it is the gathering of all of the Protestant leaders in the country. And so they all got together, and they every year they discuss different topics of religion, and they so the Lambeth Conference was at a consensus for so many years. And between 1908 and 1968, they really talked about the topic of contraception. And it was of course, within within marriage. So how can we limit our children so that our families can flourish was really the question. And so when the technology of different contraceptives came on board, the question was louder. How can we do this? Is this possible? Is this moral? Is this okay? There's lots of reasons why it should be moral. There's lots of reasons why it would be okay, because it would strengthen a marriage and it would strengthen a family and it would allow them to have more in their family and to be able to have larger houses and better schools and all sorts of questions. So they started that question, and by 1968, all of they had come to a conclusion that contraception was not immoral, so it was okay to use within marriage, and so then the louder question came to the Catholics, because the Catholics were the ones who said, no, this is how a marriage is supposed to go. This is how we are supposed to have a family. And there were many, many documents in those recent times between 1900 and 1968 in which the Catholic Church said, this is what a marriage is, this is what a family is, this is how we are to live our lives morally. So those were all taken into effect, but the question was still there. And so the culture came back and forth and said, we want to have you say definitively that we cannot use contraception in our actually, they wanted to say the opposite. They wanted to say, we want you to tell us that we can use contraception within our marriages. And so what the Catholic Church did is they did do a whole they had a committee come together with a lot of actually laymen and experts and all sorts of people who were important and who really knew about all of the effects and all of the things. And they brought these people together and they got all of the information, they got all of the data. And then Paul VI came out and said, you know what? This is really, we understand what's going on. We understand the problem. We understand the question, but this is what the faith is. And what Humanae Vitae came out and said was that the church listened to the culture, listened to the people, they heard the questions, they taught the faith, they encouraged and advised all of the people, and they teach the faith in love. And that is what really is important. We're gonna delve into this a little bit more here. It is a very essential teaching for the last 55 years. However, it has been neglected, overlooked, and sometimes just downright ignored, and saying that really doesn't matter. That's actually going to change in the next few years. We just know it's going to change in the next few years. But here it is, 55 years later, and the principles that are put in this document are still staying strong today. And I think it will continue to be strong. So we really need to pay attention to this document. But more importantly, because this document is here, it has affected our daily lives for sure. I myself have 10 children, and it was a labor of love, literally, a labor of love to have these children and to have recourse to this document every time and say, should we have another one? Should we not have another one? Why and why not? And it was very growing for our family. And I want to send this over to Mary because she has some great stories of her own and how Humanae Vitae has affected her. So I want to start out with you and your stories in your family and how all of this has just been part of your life.
So I have been married to 35 years, and I was born in 1960. And my childhood was very pleasant. I had lots of older siblings and great parents. And but by the time the 70s came along, things started changing greatly. And then I started seeing a lot of sadness within my own family, marriages, the breakdown of marriages, and not only within my own family, but friends' families and relatives. And it made me terribly sad. I was, still very young, and so I didn't understand things that were going on and the reasons behind it. And sadly for me, I did fall away. By the time I was 18, I was already away from the church, even going through Catholic school, all 12 grades at that point. And then I just lived a very secular life. And so, sadly, even though I was very aware of Humanae Vitae, it wasn't a part of my life. I didn't read it, I didn't study it, or anything like that. I lived in the world, and which has its own downfalls. And as I tell people, that there's baggage. When you're not living the faith, you just don't make the right decisions in your life. And I wish that I had stayed with the faith. But, that's all in hindsight now. But I come from a different perspective. Cory was raised Catholic as well, and she remained in the faith, but her faith actually grew deeper with the encyclical of Humanae Vitae, where mine was a very slow process, and it took me almost 20 years to fully come back to the faith. I would come back to the faith, and then I would fall away. It wasn't living your faith isn't always a one and done.
Right, absolutely.
And
not.
it's a daily thing that you're going to make the choice. And I had read excerpts of Humanae Vitae over the years, and then recently I read the document again, and I was just struck about the wisdom and the gentleness. I've heard that, this is just such a strong document that it's hard to live by, but I walked away with a totally different, more of appreciation for the document itself. They talked about the whole person, cooperation, the nobility of the human person, harmony, and living a Catholic faith sometimes is very heroic in this world. And having lots of children is also very heroic in these days. But when I was falling away, I felt like fear was a driving force. When you're worried about people say you should only have 2 children, and can we afford this? And it gets in the way, it clouds, and so fear, I think, is a driving force for a lot of people. That the church in its wisdom is there to guide us, and it's not that they give these hard and fast rules that are unrealistic. Someone told me a long time ago is that, God didn't give us the 10 Commandments to make our lives difficult. He made it so we could live a fuller, happier life. And it's just like if you have a car, you have to get the oil changed. There's a manual for it. And you can't put the wrong kind of gas in. You can't do that. But here the Catholic faith is giving you kind of 10 guidelines, and it'll make you happier. And once I came to that conclusion with God's divine help, I started seeing all the errors that, and all the times that I was so fearful. We were blessed with 3 children. And then I had many, many miscarriages over the years. But I was like, I just felt like I had to be in control of everything. And I didn't ask for God's help in many of those, situations. So reading Humanae Vitae, it's on the internet. It's a very simple document, as you said. And I read this morning, I was reading just the first opening, and it's the transmission of human life is a most serious role in which married people collaborate freely and responsibly with God the Creator as co-creators. And, this is the dignity of the human person. And I think we're going to go into more discussion about that. But, yeah, it's in the 70s, it just seemed like everything started, from my childhood viewpoint, that just things started changing, and marriages breaking down, and just in every aspect of people's lives. And I don't know, if I almost think that the Pope Paul was almost prophetic, as you said. It's 55 years ago, and yet we're still grappling with all of these same issues in our faith. It hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't. And so we are. If you just tuned in now, we are St. Joseph Radio, and we are the Woman to Woman program today. I am Cory Grizzle, and I'm here with my guest, my co-host here, Mary Hayworth, and we're talking about the encyclical letter Humanae Vitae, and that it came out 55 years ago, but it is still so relevant, and it is still the idea that as Catholics, we really do need to look back and say, why? I mean, that like you said, I didn't fall away from the faith necessarily. I didn't leave the church and come back. But I did ask the question, why? And I thought, and I grew up, in the 80s and 90s, and that was a lot. There was a lot of hatred toward the church, and I didn't grow up with hatred. I grew up with, this church is wonderful and wise, and so I would always ask myself, why? Why do these people think this way? And I think I shared before in another radio show that my mother grew up in the generation where she loved the church, she understood the church, she was very educated in church teaching, and then she got to a point where she's like, okay, well, that the church is right. I've been convinced. I have done the research. I've lived the life. I am convinced the church is right, and she just lived her life after that. So she didn't necessarily need to continue on in educating her children in a scholastic way. She educated us by example, which is powerful. And so I knew that in my heart, but I didn't necessarily have the reasons why. So when you ask the question, why did they have to write this in the first place? It always comes down to, we have sin in the world, right? We are fallen people, but they had to write this because of the questions, like I mentioned before, that the culture had. And the fact is that the technology had come to a point where it was so easy for couples to get a hold of contraception and to be able to say, oh, my life could be this much better. I could have, and nowadays, I could have the bigger TV. I can have the bigger house. I can have 3 cars. We can have all the things because we only have 2 children, because we only have the 3 children. And we don't, we can afford all of this and all of this. But is that really what the plan is for God? Is this our home? Probably not. Actually, I can say for sure. Can you say for sure? This is not my home, and I'm happy about that. That definitely we need to work towards God. So, the history, again, some more history behind this is that the technology was there because there was a medicine called Enovid in the early 50s, and it was trialed and gone through all of the FDA processes in order to help women regulate their cycles. We all know, we all have cycles that are crazy. There have always been women with cycles that are crazy and painful. And so this drug was created to help with the menstrual cycles. And in 1960, it was actually the same drug was approved not to heal sick people, but to be given to healthy people in order to regulate birth. And so in 1960, the FDA was finally approved this for contraception and not just what it was initially intended for. John Rock was a Catholic OBGYN who was involved in the creation of this, I'm going to say it wrong every time, Enovid. He was involved in that, and he was very passionate about this to be able to be used as a contraceptive. And he was a Catholic OBGYN who actually promoted this, and he got it pushed through the FDA in 1960. And so between 1960 and 1968, there were all of this. There's a Catholic that developed this and who pushed for it, and he was hoping that he would get the Pope's approval, and of course he did not. And so that is a lot of angst in our culture. I mean, we think we have angst now. It never left. Like, it was just look different. There's always angst everywhere. It just looks different. So
I think there's more now, but maybe it's just different.
It might be.
Yeah.
But it might be just a different warfare, right? It's just there's a whole lot of things we could say about that. That's for another topic. But But if you look at this encyclical, it is so well laid out. So he speaks about, Paul VI speaks about what you mentioned, Mary, which was this is the transmission of human life. There's nothing more important than the transmission of human life and human life in general, because this is our creation and we are co-creators with God. So we must respect that, and we must respect the natural law that he created. And natural law is spoken of so much in this document about how the church is just the transmission of what is written in our hearts and what is given to us by God through Scripture. And so Pope Paul VI goes back to this so many different times. So in the very beginning, he starts talking about the problem and the competency of the magisterium. Why are we here? Why are we writing this paper anyway? And so, with a rapid increase in population, that was a worry. That was a huge worry in the late 60s and early 70s because, and I'm going to get it all wrong, I know that there was a document an article that was written about how if we continue on the way that we're continuing on right now, then there will be no room for us in, I don't know, probably 1988, because I think it was written 15 years before that or something like that. And so, that was a huge worry for people that we're not going to have enough room on this earth for all the people if we keep going the way that we're going. And so he addressed that, and he said, I realize this is a problem. This is a question that we're asking. Also, is a new understanding of the dignity of woman, her place in society. People were starting to recognize that women are just as smart as men. We can have those jobs as well. However, women are made differently than men. So we have to take all of this natural law into consideration, but it was a new understanding of where women are in the culture. And so they had to address it. Whether we agreed with it, whether the church agreed with it or not, they had to address it. And in the value of conjugal love and marriage. So this is all, it's all leading up to this. But that they really did address a lot of these issues in there. So then all the new questions about, if we have this technology, because now this contraceptive pill had been approved for 8 years. And now that we have the technology, should we not be able to use it? Are we not intelligent enough to understand how these things work? And can we use this? And is this appropriate? And so what Pope Paul VI talked about was the principle of totality, which I looked it up. I didn't realize what this was, but it's something that I think the church talks about in everything, which is that all decisions in medical ethics must prioritize the good of the entire person. So in medicine, the principle of totality, he took the principle of totality and he applied it to marriages. So everything that comes into the marriage must take place within the good of the entire marriage. And so he used that not only on this medical, ethical standpoint, but also for the marriage. How is it going to affect the marriage and people's lives? So those are all the questions that were coming to him and saying, it's here. It's now finally something that is good for us, but not. So that people were thinking that this is a good thing. Can you see all the good things that are going to come out of this? So the church had to take it into consideration and go, is this really a good thing? So interpreting the moral law, I'm just reading these topics. You can find this document on the Vatican website, and they are broken down so clearly. Did you find that it was really easy to read?
It was very simple to read on every level.
Yeah.
And it was just, and it's not long, like you said, but it just had so much, it broke it down into different topics from the family point, and then it goes down further to priests and bishops and. Right.
And so for the first several paragraphs, it talks about how we got to this point, and then how do we interpret the moral law? So then they taught us as their sheep, has taught us what is the moral law in conjunction with the question that's been presented. And so then he actually the magisterium took steps to create a commission about this particular thing. And it included married couples as well as experts Pertinent to these questions, its task was to examine views and opinions concerning married life, and especially on the correct regulation of births. So that's a quote directly out of this. Like, it's not hard to read. And so it explains, what did we do to combat this question? What did we do to find out more information? Did we just say, oh, look, there's something here that's already written. Here's scripture that says it's already written, so here's the answer. No, he went to the public and the people and the experts, and he said, what is the problem, and why are people complaining, and why are people needing something like this? We want to really understand. And that is what they did. But then it says, with the evidence and the experts that has been received, as well as the opinions and the advice of a considerable number of our brethren in the episcopate, some whom sent their wives spontaneously, while others requested us to do so, we were in a position to weigh with more precision the aspects of this complex subject. Hence, we are deeply grateful to all those concerned. So he did take into consideration their opinions, their data points they created, their stories, because they had their stories too about how, they have so many children and they're in desperate, or they know so many people who are just in poverty because they have to take care of their children. So they did that. And then I think they said, however, this is really God's plan. We are countercultural. And that is something that is very important to our faith, that we are countercultural, opposite of what the culture feels is right. So then it goes on and talks about the magisterium's reply, and this is why. And then the second part of this is the doctrinal principles, all of those things that go into what it is about how we are to look at the culture in our lives. So we are actually going to take a really quick break, and then on the other side of this, we're going to get a little bit more into depth about just our stories and the document itself.
Hi, this is Matt Loggeman with St. Joseph Radio with a great gift idea. A St. Benedict bracelet, a trendy accessory for men, women, and children that not only looks good on everyone's wrist, but is actually armor for the spiritual battlefield. This unique bracelet is handmade in Europe and contains 10 medals within the braided cord in the adult size and 7 medals in the children's size. On the front of each beautiful medal is St. Benedict holding a cross in his right hand, the object of his devotion. On the back of each medal is a cross. Surrounding the back of the medal and cross are the letters VRSN MV SMQ LIVB, in Latin reference which translates, "Begone, Satan. Never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil. Drink the poison yourself." And finally, located at the top is the word Pax, which means peace. All bracelets come packaged with an informational card and a St. Benedict blessing which your local priest can administer. This gift is for everyone you love and care about, including yourself. Available from St. Joseph Radio. Check the website at www.saintjosephradio.net.
St. Joseph Catholic Radio is proud to announce the launch of SJEN TV, the St. Joseph Evangelization Network. SJEN TV is a premier online Catholic broadcasting network providing quality Catholic programming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have programming such as live studio interviews, St. Joe's Java speaker presentations, current Catholic issues, and the Pro-Life series. We're featuring the many talented speakers out of Orange County, California, and this Archdiocese of St. Louis, Missouri, including Professor John Gresham, Father James Mason, Karen Nokemper, Rick Hollerick, Bill Federer, and many more. To review the program list, just go to SJEN.TV or on Roku, SJEN TV. All this programming is free, and we are welcoming sponsorship of new programs. Find out more at SJEN.TV.
So we are back. Welcome back to St. Joseph Radio. We are Woman to Woman. This is our program, Woman to Woman. And we are talking today about the effects of Humanae Vitae in our lives today and exactly what Humanae Vitae is. We're kind of breaking it down. We're getting a lot of things out in the open that maybe some people haven't heard yet or understand about this teaching. And I am Cory Grizzle. I'm here with my co-host, Mary Hayworth. And we are just talking a little bit about how Humanae Vitae has affected our lives. We got into the Humanae Vitae a little bit beforehand. I want to get into a little bit more later, but we also want to be able to share our stories and how we have come to really accept this teaching and actually really love this teaching for our marriages. So, Mary, I want to start with you and just tell me your story about how you started to think this is not right, or maybe how you, back even farther, how you got into, where you were with your family life.
Yeah, I look back, and many of my experiences in life, the things that I thought at the time were, even though I was fallen away Catholic, was very grace-filled moments. When I started seeing so many children sad about divorce in their families, mm-hmm. and I said to myself, even though I was just a young child, I was like, that's something that I never want to do. Have my children go through. Right. It was just very, very simple thing that I thought, and I still remember. And just because the technology is out there for many various things, it doesn't always mean that it's good technology.
Right.
And I was one of those that had very irregular periods, cycles, and the doctor suggested that I go on the pill, and I did. But I noticed that, I would start, having irregular cycles or breakthrough things, and I started realizing is that our body has a delicate balance. Mm-hmm. When you're putting too many chemicals, that it throws off who we are in many ways.
Right.
And I know that meds are good for short term, but mm-hmm. I don't believe that many times long term can have effects that we're not aware of.
Right.
And when I started having these effects, I made a choice, even though I just lived with the irregular cycles at that point, because I just felt that I didn't want to have this over me,
right,
with
right.
the chemicals in my body. And but even though I had all the teachings of the faith, which I'm very grateful for, but I didn't live them in my life.
Right.
So when I was married and started having children, the pressure from the outside world saying, oh, you should only have 2 children,
mm-hmm.
but I was like, but I want more,
mm-hmm.
and I worried about that, the balance. Oh, well, you have a boy and a girl, you don't need any more.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're like, how could I not want more?
Yeah.
And but you struggle with that because the world is just pressing down on you, that you have to fit into this mold.
Right.
And so I struggled with it.
Yeah.
I didn't use contraception in our marriage, but I did struggle with the worry about it. Here I was talking earlier about the fear of having more children, and then. You don't have to fear so much,
right.
And you don't have to worry. But I had many, like I said, many miscarriages.
Mm.
And it's just that is part of life. It's
right.
given me more compassion. And but I look back on it now, and I shouldn't have worried so much. I should have enjoyed being pregnant, and enjoying the morning sickness and being co-creators with our
Coulda,
Lord.
woulda, shoulda. And I'm sure there are people listening with morning sickness right now going, no, you don't.
My brother once said,
because
I had such terrible morning sickness with most of my pregnancies, and he says, well, you know why that is? And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, when you're being lifted up by God, and when you're lifted up, your equilibrium gets out of whack, and that you start getting queasy sometimes.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I was like, oh gosh, that's so beautiful
great
that
way to
we're
look at it.
It's that you're being lifted up, and I think in one of the I don't know if it was Mary Greta or one of them, when the Blessed Mother gave birth, and she was lifted up, and so. And so I look at it, and then it made it more tolerable, morning sickness. And,
That's a great way to look at it.
But then, when I came back to the faith in my 30s, I started looking, and it's like, so many missed opportunities with grace. And then I started looking as I just was I cherish the children that I have. I have children in heaven, and I shouldn't have been so fearful.
It's hard. It's easy to say now. It's easy to say now that, gosh, we shouldn't have been so fearful about that. I mean, I have my own issues with the fearfulness too, and I have 10 children, so clearly I got over it faster, I guess. I don't know. But there's always that fear with the next child or the thought of the next child too. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely, it's there. Like, you can't ignore it. You can't say, no, I shouldn't feel this way, or I shouldn't have these emotions about this, because this is who I should be. I should be a child of God who loves all the children and wants all the babies. And but it's hard.
It is hard. And it's human weakness, too. We think we have to control everything.
My gosh, yeah.
And one of the things that I appreciated about the encyclical is that they talked about responsible parenthood.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
So many times people say, oh, well, you're Catholic, and so the Catholic Church just refuses to look at any other avenues about the number of children you have. Right. Some are not blessed with children, and that's God's plan. Others are big, like yours. Mine was smaller with 3, but what it means to have a responsible parenthood, and these are just a few things that I jotted down, is just, mutual respect for the husband and wife. Mm-hmm. You have to take into consideration the physical toll on a woman's body, the economic toll possibly on your family, the psychological toll, if that's, and other social conditions. And so you have to have a right conscience with this.
Correct.
And the church is not hard line about it. If there's valid concerns, that's where we were talking earlier about going to a wise married couple or seeking out the advice of a priest, because you do have to have a right conscience in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Before you can, it's not just because I want another car, I want a bigger house. But one thing that I remember a long time ago, I had just given birth to my youngest daughter, and I lived in a community. There was the people weren't wealthy, but there was lots of children running around. And I remember I had a sister visiting from out of state, and she goes, gosh, where I'm from, people have all these big houses, all the cars, everything like that, but they don't seem as joyful as the simple things of hearing a child's laughter.
Right.
Right. And so I kind of, you pick up and you listen to people over time, and children aren't a burden, It's struggle sometimes, but that's what gives some context into your life, the meaning part of it, the meaning of your life.
Yeah, I've heard so many people who have just one sibling or no siblings, and they would have traded all of the fancy cars and the opportunities they had and the big houses. They would have traded it all for a couple more siblings. And to hear that from a child, to hear that from someone who grew up with all of the opportunities that those parents wanted to give them, and to say, I didn't need any of this stuff. I didn't want really all of this. I would much rather have had a sibling to share my life with. But to go back to the fact that there are responsible parenthood, that is a whole section in here in Humanae Vitae, and that's the one that, man, when we accepted this as church teaching in our marriage, and we did it right away. We did it. We had our struggles, that's for sure. But when we were engaged, like I said, my family, my parents, they gave us the example of, I grew up, 6 was a lot. in a family, and so I got a lot of, you have 5 siblings, there's a lot, and I got a lot of that. And so I thought that was strange that people thought that was weird, first of all, but then, they just said, well, we wanted kids, and this is the church teaches, and this is how we're going to do this. And this was just wonderful. And so, it was a great example. And then when the culture got to me in the 90s, and I got married in 98, and I started questioning that, and my husband was a little more anxious than I was. I was like, that's fine. Let's just have all the babies. I'm good with that. And he's like, no. So, and he knows this, and he's, we both worked through so much in our lives. And this is just definitely, we tell the story all the time where he's just like, absolutely not. We're going to have 3 kids, and they're all going to be spaced out, and it's going to be perfect. And, and so then, but I was a little more persistent, and the church isn't dumb. Like, I don't know why they say this, but the church isn't dumb. So let's do a little bit, let's talk to some more people, and so we did. We talked to our priest, which actually wasn't much help at the time. And then, but, we talked to some other people. We found the Creighton model. Actually, when we talked to the priest, he's like, well, you do what you want, but here's a pamphlet I got, so luckily in St. Louis, we have a beautiful, we have a great organization for natural family planning in our city. And it's a great, it branches out into just everything. And so it touched us because he's like, oh, look, they left a pamphlet here. You can take it. It's kind of our story. And we're like, okay. And actually the best part of the story is that the priest said, you know what, follow your conscience, which is in the catechism, right? We're supposed to follow our consciences. However, your conscience needs to be informed and formed correctly. And so where in my head there was an inkling of contraception is wrong, but I don't know why. And then, in his head, he's like, well, the priest just told me I could do what I want. So he was, but then again, I was a little more persistent, and he gave us his pamphlet, and he said, here, you can do this. It was an introductory session to an NFP class, and we did that. And in that, gave him all right, this is actually, there's scientific methods behind it. There's, science and all these journals cited and, data and everything behind it. I can do this. So our compromise was, this is approved by the church, and it's effective, and we can space our children, or we can have children, we can be in control, right? So, which is not necessarily our control, but it's also, so that, going back to responsible parenthood, like that's where this came out of, was, all right, we shouldn't have all the babies. We're young. We don't have any money. We can't, this, and this. All the things that people were worried about, still back in 1968, we're still worried about in 1998. And so those were the things. And there wasn't a definitive list. That's really what we loved about that there wasn't a definitive list about, if you make between $20,000 and $30,000, you are in the poor. And so therefore, you should space your children. There's not a should or would or could in here. There is a list, a very vague list of physical, economic, psychological, social conditions, responsible parenthood. So that's a vague list of, look at those serious, grave reasons. And then, like we talked about, go to a wise couple, a wise Catholic couple. Go to your priest that you admire, or that you can talk to, you have a relationship with, and ask these questions, and say, what is grave? We're really struggling with this. Is this something we should discern? Is this something we should, or am I crazy? That's a question I get a lot.
Because if it weighs on your heart, you want to talk about it.
It does, yeah. And it's funny. One of the reasons that we had when we were going through some of these, do we abstain or do we not? One of the reasons is that, with 3 kids, our house is crazy. We had 3 kids under 6, and our house was crazy. And can we put another kid in this craziness?
I was pregnant with my 3rd, and this man said, he goes, it doesn't get easier until you have 5. It's like,
that's good advice. Because the oldest gets older.
The older gets older can help, but I thought he was just like, it only gets easier when you have 5. But
right. It's, it's tough. And this is what I think got us closer in our marriage, was discerning each child. So we had, we did use NFP from the very beginning. We did space our children. About half were surprises, I'll be honest. half were surprises and half were very planned, except for the twins. We only planned one of those. But it got us closer because we really, really talked about why. Why is this laying heavy on your heart? Why is this something you're worried about? Why is this, how can we fix that? How can we alleviate that for you? So that grew our marriage relationship in discussing each one of those.
I'm a big proponent also of the natural cycle that women have. And I think even when you're young, you should start learning about the rhythm of your own cycle. And even if you're not married yet, but I think it just would help you be more in tune with who you are. You're looking at the whole person.
Right.
And it's a simple process. I don't know if they have something for single people that just want to learn more about the cycle or not. But
Yeah.
I think that's wise. Instead of just automatically going on a pill to regulate your cycle.
Yes.
I think that's counterintuitive.
Yes, and that's been a great benefit to these natural family planning methods coming about. That has been a huge benefit. So we are today on Woman to Woman. This is our program today, Woman to Woman on St. Joseph Radio. We are a Catholic radio program designed to bring you the female perspective of our daily Catholic living in this world. I am Cory Grizzle, and my co-host today, Mary Hayworth. We are discussing Humanae Vitae. It is a document that was written in 1968. It is not only something that was very needed at the time and today, but also it's a lot of church teaching in a little tiny capsule of a document. And it goes on to say about natural law and unitive and procreative aspects of our married marriage and our married love, and just keeping to faithfulness into God's design. There's so many wonderful teachings in this document that it's not only here's the problems in our society and here's the questions that everyone has, and we have compassion about that and we really want to address it. And so here's how we're going to address it. And so the meat of this document is all about how we observe natural law and how our creation and our scripture together, they both really illuminate the truth of God and how we're supposed to live our lives. And so understanding that teaching and understanding what natural law is and how it affects our married life really helps us to understand why the church says contraception is not moral in our marriages. So did you have it? You had some more notes about that were really really insightful apart for the document itself. You want to share any more of those? Well,
so the other thing that we touched on, they touched on so many points. Each section is maybe a paragraph or two, but then also when they start promoting contraception, then you also have to take into consider, the moral law. You have to use the moral law as the compass, but there are public authorities that don't have a moral compass, and so then people are mandated to do these things, and we've heard about the one-child policy and what a detriment that is to people. And it's kind of sad when people say, "Oh, you have to do this now. For the good of the world," right, or something, and they put this heavy burden on you. And you talked earlier about how there wasn't going to be enough room on the planet for all these people. Well, you drive 20 minutes outside of St. Louis, and it's wide open spaces.
Wide open spaces.
You drive.
And there's more the farther west you go.
The farther, I was just going to say that you go into Kansas. There's Kansas City, and then you go past that. There's nothing.
Tumbleweeds. I've seen it.
And you go into Colorado Springs, and you go up to Nebraska, and that's again where they put the fear, trying to fear, that this is a bad thing, that you're going to have more children. And so I always laugh about overpopulation.
Right.
And I started hearing that when I was younger too, and then every 10 years or so they say, oh, we have too many people on the planet. And sometimes we just have to get out of our own way and listen to what God has to say about it. Or the church, they don't come to these conclusions willy-nilly,
right,
that they over time, the Humanae Vitae built on other documents
Yes.
of John the 23rd, and before that Pius X and Pius XI, and so that they don't just come up to this out of their, many people say, oh well, how would they know because they're not married and they're not,
there's a bunch of old celibate men in Rome, right?
But they hear a lot and they see a lot,
Well,
and they
yeah.
know what works, and the church knows what works and what doesn't, and I just, with the husband and wife, and whether you're single too, is like there's a God's law, and if you follow things, your life will be so much better, much more full with
Right.
the good things. And when I wasn't practicing the faith, everybody always talks about Catholic guilt. That's just Catholic guilt, and I had that when I wasn't practicing, and then when I came back to the faith, it changed. And many people might say this is too similar, but it went from guilt to deep remorse. And I really feel that there's a big difference between those two. And, even though like I didn't live accordingly, but God forgives. That's
Right.
the beautiful part of confession, that you can be absolved. And then, you have like Peter, he had deep remorse for some of the things that he did when he was younger. And so we're all at different places. And so many people, probably like me, went with the world, and maybe they did contraception and did all those things. But you can always change. You can always change course.
I think we should change the idea of Catholic guilt. I think we should change that to informed conscience. Because somewhere along the line, your conscience was informed, and it just sat there for a while.
Yeah.
And you push it back, and then you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't feel, that's not right. How could that be right?
I think it was Fulton Sheen who said your conscience rises up about once every 6 months. And you either have to look at it or you shove it back down,
Right.
and then it keeps coming up. And so you have to eventually address many of our problems that we face.
And I think that's the beauty of this document, too, is that it informs you just enough to say, but why? But why? And then there's so many footnotes in here. You could probably spend hours and days and weeks trying to figure out all of the background of this. So definitely, he was very prophetic, like you're saying, that he, Paul VI, who wrote this document, was very prophetic in saying all the things that might happen because of our use of artificial contraceptives. Artificial. So contraceptive and artificial contraceptive, that's a whole different thing. But the consequences of artificial methods, and I just kind of checkmark some of these things. Marital infidelity and the general lowering of moral standards. He saw that happen. So this is 1968, which we wouldn't generally say was the culture was definitely not a lower moral standard. The culture definitely had a little bit higher moral standard than we do now. Agreed?
And he also said, may forget the reverence due to women.
Yes. We see that constantly every day on our commercials now, on our everything that, and to link that back to contraceptive methods are definitely, I think you could make that 6 degrees of separation. That you forget the reverence due to a woman, which we see. I mean, basically, we see porn, on our TV every day. Mm-hmm. At least what they would have accepted it. That's what it would have been in 1968 sadly. For sure. So, and then the next part is the public authorities that they're giving too much to public authorities because now they have this technology in their on their hands. So there are so many more things we could talk about, but we have to wrap it up.
All right.
So I know. I think that we should have another lesson. Look at us. We're teaching, right? We should have another time when we talk about, go into maybe more in depth and maybe more in depth about our stories as well, because I think we've grown so much in really understanding this document. But I really want to encourage everyone to look it up. It's on the Vatican website. It is at your local Catholic store in a little booklet form. Look it up and read it and really ask why. Why do I believe the things I do because of the church or because of the culture? And what really is God's will for my life? That's all we want to ask. So, anything else you want to say in the last couple of seconds we have?
No, we're all on different paths, and hopefully, we want to all go in the same direction. I was reading St. Francis this morning, and he said, we're here to heal wounds, to bind what is broken, and to bring home who are lost, And I had been lost, so I'm very grateful to those that helped me along to come back, and I'm just so much more joyful and learning so much. We need to learn, continue. That's part of our faith, and reading this encyclical would go a long way in starting that discussion.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you to Mary Hayworth, and I am Cory Grizzle at St. Joseph Radio, and this is our program Woman to Woman. Please tune in next time.
Have a good day.
Been listening to St. Joseph Radio Presents from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. If you would like to join us in our evangelization efforts, you can order a copy of today's broadcast or any of our past programs by visiting us on our website, stjosephradio.net. That's SAINT, josephradio.net. Or call us 636-447-6000. It's all at your fingertips to help us evangelize the world, bringing the good news of Christ to everyone you meet and change one soul at a time. Thank you for your prayers and support. Until next time, may God bless you and your family. This has been a presentation of St. Joseph Radio Presents.